Welcome back to the Praxis Test Prep channel. If you're new here, we're all about helping you pass your teacher certification exams with ease and confidence. If you would like to join our community of educators, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our Praxis Test Prep tips and strategies. Also, feel free to comment down below with any questions that we haven't answered yet in our video series. Today, we are covering tasks of teaching questions. Praxis exam questions generally focus on your ability to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding of a specific topic area. For example, if you want to teach biology to elementary school students, then you should probably know that there are 206 bones in the human body. Being a successful teacher, however, depends on much more than just memorization of the facts. This is where tasks of teaching questions come in. These are questions that move beyond your content knowledge and instead ask you to demonstrate your understanding of specific teaching methods in order to help identify student mistakes, foster student engagement, and ultimately drive student comprehension. In this video, I'm going to cover everything you need to know, including which exams include task of teaching questions, how best to study for them, and my top 3 tips if you ever encounter a tasks of teaching question that you haven't seen before and need to make an educated guess. Ready? Let's jump in. So, first things first, will your Praxis exam even include tasks of teaching questions? Now, this is a little tricky because ETS isn't always consistent with how they label these question types. In practice, we have found that nearly every single Praxis exam includes at least 2 or 3 questions that could be labeled as tasks of teaching, and so we recommend that everyone review these types of questions. Officially, however, tasks of teaching questions are a formal part of a select number of subject-focused exams. These include the Praxis Math series, including test codes 5164 and 5165, the Praxis Science series, including test codes 5236, 5246, and 5436, as well as the Elementary Education Content Knowledge for Teaching series, which includes test codes 7811 through 7815. On these exams, you can expect tasks of teaching questions to make up a minimum of 25% of the exam, or 15 or more questions, and so it is critical that you set aside at least 25% of your study time preparing for these questions specifically. All right, so we've convinced you that tasks of teaching questions are worth prioritizing during your studying. But what exactly are they? At the simplest level, these are questions that don't just ask you what to teach, but how you teach. To make this a bit more concrete, let's dive into the key subcategories of tasks of teaching questions that you should become familiar with. First, there are curriculum and lesson planning questions. These will focus on your ability to create an effective lesson plan that is structured, engaging, and meets the learning objectives. Questions in this category might ask about how to sequence a lesson, how to incorporate different learning styles, or how to adapt a lesson for students with different abilities. You may also be asked how to choose appropriate resources and materials, how to set achievable learning outcomes, and how to create a positive learning environment. Next are questions around skill identification and development. These will have the most variance across individual Praxis exams depending on the subject area covered, but ultimately focus on identifying and developing the foundational skills that students will need in order to be successful in a specific topic area. These questions may overlap with your content knowledge as you may be asked to identify the key foundational skills needed for success. You should also have a clear understanding of how relevant skills relate to one another and ladder up to build understanding of more complex topics. For example, when approaching a mathematical topic like fractions, you will want to first ensure that your students understand basic arithmetic and are comfortable with the concept of a whole and its parts. You may also be asked questions around skill development and should be familiar with specific teaching methods such as direct instruction, guided practice, independent practice, and group work. Next are questions that deal with identifying student strategies and errors. These questions will focus on identifying how a student is approaching a specific topic or skill, and most commonly involve identifying why a student got a question wrong and then working with them to correct any mistakes. In addition to being able to identify errors in example work, you may also be asked questions around common misconceptions and how best to address them. For example, you may have a student who is struggling with a basic concept in biology, the process of photosynthesis. In reviewing their work, you find that the student believes that plants get everything they need to grow from the soil. To correct this misunderstanding, you revisit the concept of photosynthesis in a simplified manner and highlight the role of sunlight. You may choose to use visual aids such as a diagram that shows how plants need sunlight, air, water, and nutrient-rich soil to grow, or you may choose to do a simple experiment where you try to grow a plant in a dark box. And then, to help them remember the meaning of photosynthesis specifically, you may highlight the presence of the prefix photo, which means light, and can also help them associate photosynthesis with a more common word such as photograph. In this example, we just demonstrated vocabulary cues, reinforcement through real-life application, and visual teaching aids, all of which are teaching methods that you may be asked about in these questions. Finally, there are questions around evaluating student comprehension. These questions will focus on how best to assess a student's understanding and whether they have a strong grasp of a given concept or need additional instruction. This may include questions about more formal assessment strategies, such as quizzes and tests, as well as more informal approaches, such as observation and discussion. You should also be familiar with basic communication and feedback skills and ensure that you are familiar with how to provide constructive, specific, and timely feedback to your students in order to help them improve. So how should you study to ensure you are prepared for tasks of teaching questions come test date? The first and most important step is to learn about how these questions are typically structured and what they typically ask you about. Good news, you just did that. Next, you will want to go deeper into the specific subject area for your exam code and familiarize yourself with specific concepts that you will need to know for your subject and grade level. Next, you will want to go deeper into the specific subject area for your exam code and familiarize yourself with the specific concepts that you will need to know for your subject and grade level. And finally, you will want to practice. We are going to be publishing a number of additional videos on this topic, including some practice problem walkthroughs across a number of subjects, including math and science, so make sure to stay tuned for those. And stick around because right now, I'm going to give you my top 3 tips for answering any tasks of teaching question correctly. These tips aren't subject specific and won't be enough to get every problem right, but if you follow these, I guarantee that you can eliminate at least one bad answer choice on every task of teaching problem that you face. Tip 1, there is no such thing as one size fits all when it comes to teaching. Make sure to avoid answers that recommend a singular approach or that seem to ignore the diverse learning needs, styles, and abilities of your students. There is a limit, but correct answers will typically strive to cater to individual student needs and will generally recommend offering a variety of learning experiences. Tip 2, student-led is almost always better than teacher-led. You will generally want to avoid answers that focus solely on the teacher and eliminate or deprioritize student engagement. Active student participation is critical for successful teaching, and when students are involved in the learning process, they are more likely to be engaged and take ownership of their learning. Tip 3, keep it simple and stay focused. Avoid answers that seem to overcomplicate the instruction or that feel disconnected from the core concept that is being taught. For example, the test writers may try and mislead you by starting with a valid teaching strategy, but adding additional specifics that are unrelated to the current lesson. An example might be a lesson planning question that asks you to identify the best activity for introducing the basics of the American Revolutionary War. Assigning a textbook chapter on the Revolutionary War may seem like a boring way to start, but it is a much better answer than hosting a mock debate on which founding father was the best dressed. And there you have it. If you are looking for more Praxis test prep tips and techniques, check out our other videos and don't forget to head over to study.com if you are interested in registering for one of our comprehensive Praxis test prep courses. Users who complete the course have a 92% pass rate on their Praxis exams, so I definitely recommend checking that out if you are still feeling a bit unsure about your preparation for test day. Happy studying, and we'll see you in our next video.